Twitter Files 14 just dropped. We've got the RussiaGate hoax that we're going to dive into today. You can see they came over from our friend Matt Taibbi, and they feature front and center pencil neck watermelon head, the gentleman that you just saw on your screen right here. He's going to be front and center in many of these files. And so let's go right into it. Twitter Files 14 from Matt Taibbi on Twitter at @mtaibbi. The RussiaGate lies. 1. The fake tale of Russian bots and the hashtag release the memo. Release the memo hashtag. Matt writes, at a crucial moment in a years-long furor, Democrats denounced a report about flaws in the Trump-Russia investigation, saying it was boosted by Russian bots and trolls. We remember the Democrats are very unhappy with Donald Trump. They have been saying that his election was illegitimate. People like Hakeem Jeffries were saying there needs to be an inquiry. In prior Twitter files, we had all sorts of pressure from Adam Schiff and others on the big tech platforms to give them answers that they needed. Matt tells us Democrats were very unhappy with Twitter. Twitter officials were aghast. In fact, they found no evidence of Russian influence at all. Here's a letter. On January 26, 2018, this went over to several people from Congress. You can see it is sent to Dianne Feinstein and Adam Schiff, 2 members of Congress, 1 senator, 1 House. The letter from Twitter, this is 2018, 2 years after Trump takes office. 1 year. Says, Dear Senator Feinstein and Representative Schiff, Twitter says, thank you for your letter regarding trending hashtags and concerns over Russian disinformation. Mr. Dorsey has asked me to respond to the issues you raised. Twitter is deeply committed to protecting the integrity of the democratic process, and we value Congress's interest in understanding the role of social media in Russian disinformation efforts. Twitter says to Congress, as we have indicated previously, Twitter has conducted an extensive inquiry into Russian interference in 2016. We also to continue to strengthen our fight against malicious automation and coordinated efforts. We've already told you guys our work addressing this activity has yielded significant progress. One example is Twitter has established a quality team, which now focuses on these things. But with respect to our analysis of a particular hashtag, we welcome the opportunity to share some findings with you. They say, we performed a preliminary analysis on a hashtag called Release the Memo. And they have highlighted here, our initial inquiry based on available data has not identified any significant activity connected to Russia with respect to tweets posting original content to this hashtag. All right. Hey, Congress people, we know you want us to manufacture this fake narrative. We did an analysis on hashtag Release the Memo. No Russian activity. Another email came out January 23rd, 2018, 11:30 in the morning. Says, this is from so-and-so, 2 other people. It says, I think Lauren is right. You know, he's putting the cart before the horse and assuming this is propaganda and bots, right? The memo, the hashtag. You can tell him that our very preliminary assessment is that not much of this is inorganic activity. Ask him to please let us understand the facts before jumping ahead to try to address it, right? They're unhappy with that hashtag. They say we are feeding congressional trolls. They are sending us letters harassing us. They want us to censor the hashtag. So Twitter warned politicians and the media that they not only lacked evidence, says Matt, but they had evidence that the accounts weren't even Russian. They're not Russian. On January 18th, Republican Devin Nunes submitted a classified memo. This went over to the House Intel Committee. Said the FBI is abusing and obtaining FISA surveillance authority against Trump-connected figures, including the infamous Steele dossier, which is something we talked a lot about here extensively in the Michael Sussman trial saga. You see here, this is an unclassified memo. Subject says Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuses at the DOJ and the FBI, declassified by Trump, February 2, 2018. It says this memo provides members an update on the DOJ, FBI, and their abuse of FISA during the 2016 presidential elections. And they raise a whole slew of concerns. All of the courts, all of the FBI, right? There were many different things being manipulated to go spy on Trump campaign and Trump advisors. It was rampant. Nunes' assertions would be verified later. Michael Horowitz released a report December 2019 that highlighted a couple of these features. Says that there were potentially serious problems with Michael Steele's description of Trump. And to catch everybody up, remember, there were all sorts of allegations that Trump was colluding with the Russians. Trump was engaging, Michael Steele was talking to Ambassador Viselyak, the Russians, saying, just hold on a minute, like, don't do anything until we get into office. And this was just sort of a routine call that happens during a presidential transition. They turned it into a giant thing. They said that Trump was getting money from the Kremlin. They were using Yoda phones and laundering all sorts. It was all made up. Jake Sullivan at the time, who went to Oxford, was working for Hillary Clinton as a campaign advisor, and Michael Sussman was working at Perkins Coie, which is where Mark Elias used to work, and Sussman was colluding with Jim Baker. Jim Baker used to work at the FBI as general counsel before he left there and went over to Twitter, right? It's a big, disgusting web. And so they say, yeah, there were potentially serious problems with that Steele dossier, which was manufactured and given over to Michael Sussman through Fusion GPS. Michael Sussman took that to the FBI, and that was the basis for, a lot of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. Could have been some serious problems with how the FBI handled that. You think? Yeah. Among other things, regarding the allegations, the primary subsource's account, if true, was not consistent with anything else. In fact, it was contradicted by other things. That comes from the Inspector General, right? So they are debunking the legitimacy of any of these original allegations. Not true. Trump didn't do any of that stuff. Nevertheless, the national media in January and February of 2018, they denounced the Nunes report. They called it a joke. Nunes came out and the OIG came out and they said this was all a hoax. They were trying to throw Trump under the bus by making this manufactured narrative. And the media got their copy and paste talking points. You can see MSNBC came out. 2 ex-DOJ officials on the Nunes memo, a bad joke. Oh, yeah. We had another one here. Andrea Mitchell's Nunes has turned the House Intel Committee, quote, into a joke, right? This is what happens all the time. The Nunes memo is out. It's a joke and a sham by Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman. These are all copy and pasters, okay? Joe Concha, he gets an email or, a Slack message or a Telegram message or whatever. They just copy and paste it from their Discord channel right onto their WordPress engine. It goes public. Here's another one. Ex-RNC chairman rips Nunes for the joke that it is. Copy, paste, one after another. But then after that, on January 23rd, Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, along with Pencil Neck Schiff, published an open letter saying that the hashtag gained the immediate attention and the assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. Well, that's weird because Twitter said that's not true at all. So why would these Congress people be lying to everybody in America? Let's see what this letter says. Well, can't really read that. It's not all that detailed. This says, according to the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy, this effort gained the attention of Russian influence operations. In their press release, they request Twitter and Facebook, these two government officials, okay, this is the government acting, extending their disgusting hands into private sector businesses and telling them what to do or else. You're telling me Congress requests a private investigation? What happens if you don't find what they want? What happens to your company? So they just request Twitter and Facebook conduct an investigation into the Russian bot activity and release the memo campaign. They say, if these reports are accurate, we're witnessing the ongoing attack by the Russian government through Kremlin-linked social media actors directly to interfere and influence our democratic process. So they say, dear Mr. Dorsey and dear Mr. Zuckerberg, we request your assistance. This has gained the immediate attention of Russian influence. Thank you, Dianne Feinstein and Pencil Neck Adam Schiff down at the bottom. So they know that that's not really what's happening because Twitter has told them that in a letter to both of them that Matt Taibbi provided to us. You see, this letter was on January 26th. Not identified any significant activity. January 26, 2018. That was actually after. This is on January 23rd, 2018. They're saying, so there's this ongoing conversation. It looks like Twitter tells them that after they release the memo. They're saying that this distorts all sorts of information. They say Republican. So get ready for this to happen again, okay? The Republicans are going to be facing this battle again. The Democrats are going to say this exact same stuff to Kevin McCarthy and to Matt Gaetz and to Jim Jordan. It's going to be the same script. So just brace yourself for it. Specifically, they say the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence is providing misleading talking points authored by Republican staff that distorts highly classified information, right? It's going to be the same talking points. We also see that when the Nunes memo came out, a senator from Connecticut called Richard Blumenthal sent another letter out, and he's responding to the memo. He said here, "We find it reprehensible that this is being manipulated to interfere with the democratic processes." And they're all referencing this other entity called the Alliance for Saving Democracy as an entity that is providing them with details. Taibbi continues, says, Feinstein, Schiff, and Blumenthal, this little Democratic tripart, and media members are all pointed to the same source, the Hamilton 68 dashboard, created by former FBI counterintelligence official Clint Watts, under the auspices of the Alliance for Securing Democracies. So they find a fake source rather than Twitter. Release the memo, according to this, is now the top trending hashtag among Russian Twitter bots and trolls on Twitter. This is according to the Hamilton 68 website, right? That's what they're referencing in their official government memos. Somebody said, I've never seen any single hashtag that has had this much of activity behind it. An analyst who helps run the Hamilton 68 dashboard. It tracks about 600 accounts that are tied to Russians. Release the memo is the top trending hashtag among Twitter accounts linked to Russian influence, according to the Hamilton 68 website. So all of them are referencing this authority to say that this is Russian instituted. But we know that though Hamilton 68 launched just last summer, Morgan said he felt comfortable making that claim because it peaked from one percentage to another percent. All right. Now, if you go on the dashboard of this platform from the Hamilton 68 dashboard, they tell us that there was a picture of Vladimir Putin, who was releasing the bad Twitter birds into the Twitter sphere, saying, go out there, disinformation bots, and just go wreck the world. That's Vladimir Putin. And you can see that they have the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which is the entity that is going to be securing democracy. And we're very fortunate that we have these people in this alliance to protect us. Lord knows we would otherwise have no democracy. Now, Taibbi says, look, inside of Twitter, executives panned Watts and Hamilton 68 and the Alliance for Securing Democracy. So Matt this is developing here in front of us. And we see that there are these two sort of worlds. We have Twitter and we have all of these other authorities called Watts, Hamilton 68, Alliance for Securing Democracy. Twitter says there's not really much Russian influence at all. Actually, we're not even too concerned about it. We did an analysis. Everything looks fine. But that's not the right answer for the Democrats. They need some other authority so they can write their memos and they can push the companies to get better answers so that they then can interface with them by putting Elvis Chan right up their sphincter in San Francisco. So this whole situation is, you can see sort of bifurcating into these two sides, these two camps, government plus these think tanks versus Twitter. There's some emails back and forth. We see that inside Twitter, Executives didn't like those organizations. There were two key complaints. Hamilton seemed to be everyone's only source, and no one was checking with Twitter. Of course they weren't, because Twitter was giving them the wrong answers that we saw at the start of the thread. That there is no problem. Hamilton says, oh, there's a major problem. So which one is pencil neck Schiff going to pick? There are some emails going back and forth. You see this one is drafted. An original email was sent January 23rd, 2018, 8:49 a.m. It says, thanks both. You know, this is also a comms play for ASD. They've made a very strong media push in the last week, piggybacking on Clint's testimony. We should have a separate discussion about if, when, and how we confront ASD privately with our knowledge of their flaw. ASD is going to be the Alliance for Saving Democracy, right? The heroes of the planet. The people who wake up every day, look at themselves in the mirror, and they say, you're going to save democracy today. You can do it. I'm all for affirmations, but these people are, they're not going to save democracy. Let me tell you that. It's a comms play for Alliance for Saving Democracy. They made a very strong push in the media, jumping on other testimony. We should have a separate discussion, says Twitter, about how, if, and when we confront them privately with our knowledge of their flawed methodology and their dashboard. They're giving these Congress people bad information. They're like spreading misinformation. These Congress people are literally latching onto it so that they can be reoriented in a more accurate direction. Or do we address it in our response to Schiff and Feinstein? Like, what do we do about this? Also, we need a strategy for Hamilton 68. Let's get through today and we'll circle back on that. Okay, so we have all these like third-party external actors who are breathing down the Twitter employees' necks. This is the government acting upon the private company. This is what makes it a government actor and makes it unconstitutional, when the result of all this activity is the censorship and disenfranchisement of Americans. There's another email. This one came out same day, January 23rd, 2018. There's a bunch of bullet points here. There's a bullet point that says, okay, everybody, listen, I got it all. I got it reordered slightly down below. Here's what we're going to have on the agenda. 1, attributed to a Twitter spokesperson. They say Twitter is committed to addressing malicious activity on our platform, and we take any assertions of such activity very seriously. We're going to work with Schiff and Feinstein. Now they say, also, we've been monitoring hashtag release the memo, and they appear to be organic. We've not seen any indications that accounts engaging in this are predominantly Russian or that Russian accounts are driving this. It all appears to be organic. Lots of conservative Twitter accounts are using one or both of these hashtags, including Donald Trump Jr., Steve King, Mark Meadows, many others. There's a lot of retweets and organic engagement. Everybody wants to see the memo. We'll have more in our official response, but they say, off the record, I encourage you to be skeptical. This is from Twitter, to be skeptical of Hamilton 68's take on this, which, as best as I can tell, is the only source for these stories. Hamilton 68 does not release the accounts that make up their dashboard, so nobody can even verify that they are, in fact, Russian. Oh, wow. So they're producing results and you can't even see how they were produced. 2, it's extraordinarily difficult for outside researchers who don't have access to our data to do anything. If you speak to them, I encourage you to press them on how they can be so sure of these claims when they don't have access to our same data. Well, it's probably because it's not a real entity. It's a government operation. It says, from Matt, another email, January 24th, 8:20 in the morning. This one comes from Yoel Roth. We remember him. Says, okay, listen, everybody, another thought. Is now the time we go public with the fact that any given user counts only count once towards a trend? Says, given all the swirl around this hashtag release the memo, it's based on Hamilton, which is that third-party dashboard. That's based on raw tweet count. We'd be able to broadly refute it without actually sharing anything too sensitive. So I'd suggest something along the lines of, we have these algorithms. We saw this many users, X times Y times Z equals Q percentage. And also, we've got tweet decks and all of these other things. Okay, so he's explaining why their numbers are trash. Yoel Roth, the former head of Trust and Safety. And they say if the Alliance for Democracy isn't going to check any things with us, we should correct the record. This email comes from Carlos. He says, this is regarding read and respond to Feinstein and Schiff, another January 23rd email. Carlos says, listen, we should reach out privately to maintain the relationship. All right. Don't put out a public press release to blast these people publicly. Instead, though, let's just talk to them in behind closed doors. But he says, if ASD, the Alliance for Saving Democracy, if they're not going to fact check anything, we should feel free to correct the record on their work, right? If they're just going to put out garbage out there in the ether, we should be able to respond and correct it. Yoel Roth was also out. January 24th, he says, look, I think we can, in fact, push back on this Russian stuff. I just reviewed the accounts that posted the first 50 tweets with hashtag release the memo. And while a few of them definitely look spammy, none of them have signs of being tied to Russia. We can very easily produce a number like we did for Brexit. We found less than X percentage of accounts tweeting this hashtag. We could go deeper, but there's no reason to go deeper, is what Yoel says. 18, Matt says, another email came out. Here's their conclusion. TLDR, too long, didn't read. They're summarizing the whole synopsis. They say, Schiff and Feinstein have released a statement calling on us to investigate what ASD Hamilton says is Russian bots driving the hashtag release the memo. And they want a report submitted by 1/26. Congress is demanding that Twitter abide by their timelines. Calling us to investigate and submit a report by Friday, 1/26. Yoel and the team have been monitoring the engagement on this for hashtag release the memo and hashtag Schumer shutdown, and engagement appears to be organic. It's not driven by Russian bots. Com started getting media inquiries on hashtag release the memo last Friday when Advocacy for Saving Democracy Alliance issued a press release saying that there were Russian bots coming from these accounts. But we investigated these. We found engagement was overwhelmingly organic and driven by strong engagement. WikiLeaks, Trump Jr., King, and others. And because the initial wave of news coverage did not include us, reporters who did initially reach out to Twitter ran with ASD as a single source. We've been in reactive mode ever since. Comms has been pushing back on background, cautioning off the record on why reporters should be very skeptical of those Russian bot claims. ASD does not know that we've reverse engineered their dashboard, and we're being careful not to hint at this in our pushback. Wow. So Twitter can actually see what they're looking at. Be very skeptical of them. Reminder, ASD does not know that we have reverse engineered their dashboard, and we're being careful to not hint at this. Little corporate, espionage going on there. We were just starting to see virtually identical pattern play out with Schumer shutdown. Then we got press releases about that too. So they know there are no issues here at all. Now, a staffer for Dianne Feinstein, DeFi, agreed that it would be, quote, helpful to know how Hamilton identifies these accounts. But this was only after Feinstein published her letter, right? They don't actually care about the accounts. They care about the narrative. So there's a letter from Carlos. On Tuesday, it says, I had a good follow-up conversation with DeFi's staffer. That's Dianne Feinstein's staffer. FYI, we built a very good relationship through this, despite her boss being DeFi. So this person's very nice. Shout out to this nice lady who's working for Dianne. Probably a miserable job. I floated the idea of them asking for these groups for 1, accounts they're tracking. 2, the process by which they decide an account is a Russian influencer. She made no promises, but she is trying to get folks on board. She agreed that it would be helpful to know this info. This is great. That is something of that Blumenthal's guy said too. GMF is less about bots and more about Russians. Now this continues. Taibbi says, when Twitter spoke to a Blumenthal staffer, who's another senator, they tried to wave him off because we don't believe these are bots. Carlos writes, okay, here's a smaller group. Blumenthal staffer called because he wanted to send a follow-up letter to Schiff and Feinstein, saying that if the release the memo trend was Russian bots, Twitter should do another user notice to the victims. We had a real convo. I tried to wave him off this particular storyline because we don't actually believe these are bots, right? Another senator is pushing back on Twitter. Carlos says they're not bots. They're not Russian bots. They're real people. I said that Twitter spent a lot of resources to respond to the initial request. I thanked him for reaching out, said I understand his bosses were looking for another press hit. I said I would ask the team if there's something easier they could ask for. We can't deliver the news that you want. And the reward from Blumenthal shouldn't be round after round of requests. It doesn't fix the problems. It distracts our teams from the real fight. All right, I told you, I feel bad. I think Carlos was the guy I felt bad for last time. Carlos is trying to run, do his job. I don't know what his politics are. Don't really care. But his at this moment in time, he's got all these Congress people breathing down his neck. Get me the data. There is no data. And now it's Blumenthal in addition to Schiff, in addition to Feinstein. Somebody else, Lauren, said, without saying it directly, it might be worth nudging Blumenthal's staffer, saying that since we have been monitoring this from the get-go and have little reason to believe it's a big Russian propaganda movement, it could be in his boss's best interest to not go out there on this because it could come back to make him look silly. Oh boy, poor Lauren. She had no idea who she's talking about. If they can't find the evidence, they'll just make it up. Obviously, very naive. Again, I would do this in a nuanced way if you go this path. It hits at the hubris, the driver of these public calls. Tell them to stop asking us to manufacture material. Taibbi continues, he says, one Twitter executive even tried to negotiate, implying an undisclosed future PR concession if Blumenthal would lay off on this. A letter went out January 23rd, 11:25. One more. If we flood right now with additional notice, it undermines the value of the direct notice. People will not take this seriously if we do it again. We want the conversation to continue on the notice we sent. Could we consider flagging that our numbers go up? Look, consider this. There's a DC strategy question I can't speak to, but it seems like there are other ways that we can win if we can offer him some other things. There are other wins we can offer him. And say, please emphasize the detrimental effects of demanding this again right now, okay? Tell Blumenthal, we'll give you other things, but you keep repeating this and demanding more on this is actually hurting you, it's hurting us. They're demanding stuff that we can't give you. Matt says, doesn't matter at all. Blumenthal doesn't care. Again, it's not about the story. It's not about the facts, it's about the story. Blumenthal published the letter anyways. In 24, Taibbi says, executives eventually grew frustrated over what they saw as a circular process. They were presented with claims of Russian activity. Even when they denied it, it led to more claims. Government says the Russians are on your platform. Twitter says no, they aren't. They say yes, they are. They say no, they aren't. They told this to Senator Blumenthal. They said, look, Twitter expends a ton of time and resources. On January 23rd, Colin sent this over. Says, I think we can try to follow up with Blumenthal again. But the bottom line is that we can't do a user notice each time this happens, okay? Let's huddle on this, on how we can tap KG to help us on Blumenthal. Carlos and I can reach out next week. Carlos also says Tuesday the 23rd. All right, listen. Blumenthal staffer called because he wanted to send a follow-up to the Schiff letter. He says, I tried to wave him off and Twitter spent a lot of resources on this. And so don't come back round after round for request after request. Eventually, Twitter staff realizes the following. On January 23rd, they say, Carlos writes, Colin may have more to say on this, but based on my experience with him at DOT, Blumenthal isn't always looking for real and nuanced solutions. He doesn't want facts. He doesn't want solutions. He wants to get credit for pushing us further. He wants to get credit for pushing us further. And he may move on only when the press moves on. He wants to crack the shell, open the door, so that the government can basically commandeer Twitter, as we saw they did. Ultimately, senior executives talked about feeding congressional trolls, and they compared the situation to a children's book, if you give a mouse a cookie. Lauren said, "This has become, quote, if you give a mouse a cookie with members of Congress." Children's book reference. Don't know that I ever read the book, but I'm asking the mouse asks for a glass of milk. Here it is. Thank you, Matt, for bringing the story to our attention. Here it is in the story. If you want a mouse, if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want a glass of milk, which will lead the wave to other exhausting requests, at the end of which he'll want a glass of milk and one more cookie. Here's the book. Oh, actually, this is a play brought to you in 2006, 2007. If you give a mouse a cookie, says the child sitting on a rock, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And then this child, in the moral of the story, looks like he gives the mouse a glass of milk. What a very good boy. Now, this is very similar to what happened with Twitter. The government is like the mouse. Twitter gave the mouse a cookie. Before long, Twitter was inside the house sleeping with the wife at Twitter HQ. Totally inappropriate. That little boy's like, what the heck just happened here? That escalated quickly. But that's what happened. Now, Matt says the metaphor for the endless Russia request was so perfect that one executive wrote, "I'm legit embarrassed that I didn't think of that first." Says, "I like that approach. Seems like a recipe for conspiracy theories. Release the Twitter attachment. Can we do a simple letter and tell them that any explanations we don't want publicly orally?" I'm legit embarrassed I didn't think of that first. Now, Matt says, despite universal internal conviction that there were no Russians in the story, Twitter went on to follow a slavish pattern of not challenging Russia on the record. Outside counsel from DC-connected firms like Debway and Plimpton advised Twitter to use language like this, quote, "With respect to particular hashtags, we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform." Perfect legalese. Here's what they say. With respect to particular hashtags in your letter, use that in your phrase. Don't add any fuel to the fire. Tell them, this is a lawyer saying, okay, tell them this in your response. Tell them, "We thank Congress for your leadership. We want to be an industry leader. We proactively notify users, and we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform." Perfect legalese. That letter probably cost $2,000. Now, Matt continues. He says, as a result, reporters from the AP, Politico, Rolling Stone, everybody, they continue to spam, copy, paste all of the Russia story. Russian Twitter accounts push hashtag release the memo, conservative meme. That came over from Tom at the Associated Press. This one also published. Tracking influence campaigns, U.S. News, nail in the coffin for the Nunes memo. It's all being promoted by Russian bots. What's the conspiracy behind the right-wing meme? No. Russians weren't just blamed for the release the memo. They were blamed for a lot of other things, but also the Schumer shutdown and the Parkland shooting and gun control now. All were being demanded to be investigated. Here is an email, January 23rd, 2018. All right, got all reordered slightly. Both hashtags appear to be organically trending. NBC, Politico, AP, Times, Business Insider, other media outlets, they all declined to comment for this story, says Matt. He says the staff of Feinstein, Blumenthal, Schiff, and others, they also declined to comment. Nunes did comment, though. He said that Schiff and the Democrats falsely claimed that Russians were behind the release the memo hashtag. All my investigative work, by spreading the Russia collusion hoax, they instigated one of the greatest outbreaks of mass delusion in U.S. history. Matt says, this release the memo hashtag episode is just one of many in the Twitter files. The RussiaGate scandal was built on the craven dishonesty of politicians and reporters who for years ignored the absence of data to fictional scare headlines. For more, he says, there will be more coming. Follow all of the appropriate parties there. And he reminds us that Twitter has no editorial input on this story. Searches were carried out by third parties. Well, before we jump into your comments and your questions, let me remind you about our amazing friends over at 4Patriots, because as you know, food shortage could be coming here. Even in the United States, they've been talking about this as recently as last year in July. We've got drought, inflation, new policies. America's food supply is reaching its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever. And you can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4Patriots survival food kits ever. You can go to 4patriots.com and get this amazing food. It's not ordinary. We're talking about good for 25 years super survival food. This stuff is hand-packed in family-owned facilities in the United States. It gives jobs to over 200 Americans. And the kits, they're compact, they're water-resistant. They stack easily. They've got different delicious breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. All you have to do is add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com, use code Robert to get 10% off anything in the store, including this 3-month survival kit that is amazing. And you'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on anything that's over $97. They're called 4Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. And you can go to 4patriots.com, the website right on your screen. Use code Robert to save 10% off your first order and start building your stockpile today. And that is it for Twitter Files 14 from Matt Taibbi, showing us that multiple senators were literally sending emails and demands through their staffers from Twitter to silence conservative hashtags that they didn't like. And so there will certainly be more to come from the Twitter Files. We will continue to cover it. Thank you for joining in wherever it is you are tuning in from, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.